Alrighty.
Okay.
All right. All right, Mr. Moderator, honorable judges, and worthy opponent, and ladies and gents in the chat. I wish to implore you to imagine a moment that the United States Congress, exercising the very same sovereign authority that it has wielded since 1889, enacts a enacts a statute declaring that any alien, citizen or not, who engages in or advocates for or provides material support for acts of jihadist terrorism or to violently overthrow the government or constitution is deplorable on grounds of national security, deportable, sorry, on national security grounds and public safety. Imagine further that this law is drafted with facial neutrality. It targets conduct and ideology, not creed. It applies equally to any foreign national who preaches or practices violent subversion, whether in Islamists, anarchists, communists, or otherwise. This is not a hypothetical fantasy. It is a policy squarely within the plenary powers of the Supreme Court has recognized for 136 years as absolute, conclusive upon judiciary, and incident of sovereignty belonging to the government of the United States. Words taken directly from the Cha Chang-ping v. United States of 1889 case, which was reaffirmed in every major immigration case since from Fong Yue Tang of 1893 all the way up to most recently of Trump v. Hawaii of 2018, and other recently with the Department of Homeland Security versus Thurgism of 2020. The plenary power is not a relic of a bygone era. It is a living constitutional foundation that allowed the exclusion of Chinese laborers for 61 years, the expulsion of anarchists and communists during the Red Scare, the deportation of thousands of radicals under the International Security Act, and most recently, the sustained entry restrictions on nationals from high-risk terrorist states upheld in the Supreme Court of 2018. The doctrine has never been overruled and has never been diluted in its core holding. When Congress or the president acts to protect the nation from external threats, the courts do not substitute their judgment for the judgment of people's elected representatives. Tonight, my opponent will wave the banners of religious liberty, due process, and equal protection. This will invoke the specter of Japanese internment camps and the stain of Chinese exclusion, but these historical tragedies are not precedents that bind us. They are warnings of what happens when policy abandons facial neutrality and targets citizens en masse on basis of immutable ancestry. My position does the opposite. It demands individualized findings, neutral criteria, and rigorous evidence of conduct that endangers the republic. It respects the absolute constitutional line drawn in, oh my God, I forgot how to say this name, Afoyam v. Rusk and Vance v. Terezes, the natural-born citizen, that a natural-born citizen cannot be stripped while simultaneously honoring the equally absolute line drawn in the Chinese exclusion case and in progeny that non-citizens, however long they have resided here, possess only the privileges Congress chooses to extend. The question before us is not whether we love liberty. Of course we do. The question is whether a sovereign nation retains the ancient and inalienable right to decide who may remain within its borders when their continued presence constitutes a clear and present danger to the lives of its citizens. From 1889 until this very day, the Supreme Court has answered. Sorry.
All right. So I'm not as eloquent, nor have I ever been. So, I don't have a pre-planned speech or anything like that. I'm just going to go ahead and jump straight into it. Okay. So let's start off with the fact that the initial claim that was made was that not only would a Muslim travel ban be constitutional, but that it would also be constitutional specifically to prevent those who are practicing Muslims from holding office. This was the claim. I'm not bringing up anything about Reagan or anything like that, despite what Drunken might believe. In fact, actually, I'm specifically going to be citing number one. It's going to be Article 6, Clause 3 of the Constitution of the United States that explicitly states that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. This is actually furthermore backed up by a Supreme Court case. Specifically, it was going to be, oh, fuck, what's the name of it? Turcaso v. Watkins, which actually was settled in 1961. Now, what this specifically states is, in the past, it per the Constitution for federal office, that at no point in time can you ever exclude somebody from holding office. There were some states that still had their own specific religious test cases. Eventually, it wound up getting passed out. They were thrown out as federal protections and federal laws were passed and further strengthened. Okay. Specifically with the case of Turcaso v. Watkins, this was more so an atheist. It was, I do believe, Maryland. The state of Maryland had a religious test, and it required them to affirm their belief in God, stuff like that. He was an atheist, so he was denied his ability to take office, so he took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then turned around and ruled that not only did that violate the First and 14th Amendments, but it also violated Clause 6, Section 3 of the Constitution. So when we sit here and we talk about preventing Muslims from taking office, it is explicitly forbidden in the Constitution. And there are multiple case laws that support this, specifically with the Supreme Court. Then when we're talking about a Muslim travel ban, it is one thing to talk about, for example, Trump v. Hawaii, where people attempted to challenge it in the Supreme Court because they believed that it was a target ban against those who were of a specific religion due to other statements and sentiments that Trump had iterated throughout his term during in office. However, the only reason why the Supreme Court upheld the original travel ban was due to the fact that while, yes, a majority of the countries that were listed in those travel bans were in fact Muslim majority or Muslim ran countries, there were still other countries like North Korea and China that were also a part of those travel bans. The Supreme Court explicitly stated that the only reason why they were going to be ruling in favor of Trump in the Trump v. Hawaii case was due to the fact that the travel ban operated within very, very strict yet tenuous lines that teetered just on the edge of not violating religious freedoms. That is the only reason why that Supreme Court case was upheld. So, based upon the fact that the Constitution says it, and there are multiple Supreme Court cases that say it, no, it would not be constitutional to prevent a Muslim from holding office, and it would not be constitutional to have a Muslim travel ban. It would be constitutional to have put a travel ban from countries that are majority Muslim, as long as you can prove that the reasoning behind that travel ban is due to any sort of security or national security concerns, such as diplomatic relations going sour or the country being politically or criminally unstable. But you would not be able to do it based upon the idea of a religion, regardless of what the tenets of that religion are, or a lack of religion even.
My following rebuttal to that is that in order to enact what I'm proposing and maintain constitutional scrutiny, it's not a test of religious doctrine. It's a test of the person's ongoing actions, ongoing sentiments, and what they have stated. It's clear. It's clear in the Constitution that when a public office holder has to swear an oath, they have to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and its core tenets. When you have people like Rashida Tlaib and you have Ilhan Omar stating that their main core interests in being public office is for the interests of insert other nation here, specifically Ilhan Omar stating that her main interest is of the Somali people. Now, it's not a coincidence that we have an issue here where two Muslim public office holders are making this very clear that they want to make their public office solely about the rights of other people outside the United States. This is a clear violation of their oath to the Constitution. This is a clear violation of what they swore that they would do, which is keep the best interests of America at their heart rather than the interests of a foreign power. And it is not something that we as Americans should tolerate or allow. Now, that being said, again, I must reiterate, this is not a religious test. What I want is a test of what someone's character and words have said and done, which has pushed a certain narrative, and they will continue to push a certain narrative until actions have been made and constitutional scrutiny has been utilized by the judiciary.
So
I recant I hold my time.
okay. So the question I have then, right? Because we're going from the initial statement being that that a Muslim travel ban would be constitutional, and barring those who are Muslims from holding office would be constitutional, to now saying, well, actually, it's not about their religion, it's about those people, and they just happen to be a part of that religion. So the question I have then is, if you're specifically talking about passing laws that are going to be tightening and restricting regulations in order to background check and better vet people for their ability to hold office, what is the point of bringing up the religion anyways, unless you were explicitly implying that the religion is the cause of the ideology, which in that point in and of itself would be you directly contradicting your claim?
So I challenge that because due to the very core tenets of Islam being practiced by the majority of moderate and radical Islamists and Muslims across the globe, have stated several times that they are antithetical to Western values and Western doctrine. That being said, I will concede the fact that there are moderate Muslims who hold Western values to a high degree, considering it is I forget the verse in the Quran, but there is a verse in the Quran that does tell the people of Islam to follow the laws of the land. This is very clear and explicit. However, there are other core tenets of Islam that will adversely affect how another person, how a Muslim will conduct themselves in a public office. We have an issue. I would have the same issue if radical Christians were trying to come together and ban abortion unilaterally across the United States. Now, while I personally would believe in that, my morals tell me that is wrong. However, my adherence to the Constitution states that cannot pass. We have, albeit anecdotal evidence, but evidence nonetheless of the city council in Dearborn, Michigan, pushing Muslim-like laws forward and enforcing them. Now, mind you, it is hyperbolic to say that they have Sharia law patrols and the like, but there are talks about that in places in the Muslim quarters in New York. And most recently, outside of the United States, we have a UK MP arguing that you cannot ban cousin marriage because it would violate Muslim religious freedom. Now, this shows right here that it's flying in the face of Western doctrine and Western creed, where that's a practice that's been banned for a very long time and a value that's been banned for a very long time. Now, to bring this back to America, while our Constitution is probably the most near perfect piece of parchment ever written, it does leave gaps and specific powers to Congress and the executive branch to wield it properly, to defend the values and the principles of our federal republic.
Okay, so then then that means that the argument that you're making is specifically for the religion, not the people. Because you can't sit here and on one hand say, oh, well, actually, it's not really about the religion. It's about the people. We need to better vet the people. There's no issue with these people practicing. But then turn around and make an argument like you just did for the past 2.5, 3 minutes, specifically against the religion. So you have to drop one or the other. Because currently, as it stands, you're saying one thing, but your argument is the complete opposite. And your argument is suggesting and requiring things that directly violate the Constitution and settled Supreme Court rulings. The verse that you were referring to was Sera en Nise from 459, specifically saying, oh, you who have believed, obey Allah and obey the messenger and those in authority among you. And if you disagree over anything, refer it to Allah and the messenger. If you should believe in Allah and the last day, that is best for you and best for the interpretation. Right? Now, with that specifically, there's no argument there. I just figured I would provide that for the viewers and people in chat that aren't familiar with it, because obviously you knew it, you just weren't familiar with the exact verse. Now, with that being said, again, you're making an argument for the religion. It is unconstitutional. We can put tighter restrictions in place for sure to better vet these people. But at the end of the day, what you are advocating for is a ban against a religion. You're specifically advocating for an exclusion against a religion. Because if you exclude one person that's a part of that religion because of the tenets of that religion and their adherence to those tenets, then you have to exclude all of them. Because if the argument is based around the religion, then it's based around the religion. You cannot make an argument for the individual and the religion at the same time. You are either making an argument for the individual or you're making an argument for a religion. And currently, as it stands, every argument that you have presented is specifically against the religion, which is unconstitutional.
Well, I would challenge that, considering we have other Supreme Court precedent. Now, I know you said that Supreme Court precedent has struck it down several times. I will say there is Supreme Court precedent with Herodis and Shaughnessy from a 1951 ruling, which was a 6-2 court upheld ruling, which was it was a former Communist Party member who faced deportation simply for his association with the Communist Party. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that it has a clear parallel with the other exclusionary acts that Congress and the judiciary have upheld, specifically the Chinese Exclusion Act and most recently the travel ban. Now, this also clearly stated that plenary powers make largely immune to judiciary inquiry, as well as Calvin v. Press, which was in Galvin v. Press in 1954, which basically upheld the same. This is where I'm drawing my conclusion from, that we have. I apologize, I misspoke. And we also have another U.S. Supreme Court, which is Klendurst and Mendel, which was a 1972 case. A Belgian Marxist was denied a visa on the premise that he was a outspoken Marxist, was practicing Marxist tenets, and was openly stating that he would be being a thorn in the side for America, because at the time he was a well-known author. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled that a citizen's First Amendment doesn't override plenary power. So that's where I'm trying to bring this together, where it's, yes, the religion is not the core main issue. It's what a person does with that religion is the core main issue.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here. number one, when we're talking about what was it? It was Harrisades v. Shaughnessy, and then of course Shaughnessy v. United States X-related Meze, 1953 and 1952. Those were the 1952 case specifically was in regards to just the deportation challenge in general. Yes, they upheld the fact that he had the ability to be deported because he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was a legal resident, but he was not a U.S. citizen. Furthermore, with the Shaughnessy v. United States ex rel Meze from 1953, that ruling explicitly pointed out the fact that they had the ability to reinforce the plenary power doctrine, stating that non-citizens seeking entry have minimal constitutional protections, and the power to exclude is a sovereign attribute. This had nothing to do with U.S. citizens and everything to do with the fact that he wasn't a U.S. citizen. That was why they had the ability to. The problem is again, when you're talking about preventing the religion, because that is the initial claim and that is what the arguments that you've provided so far, we're not just talking about people who have immigrated to the country. We're also talking about people who are born in the country. These are legal U.S. citizens that are practicing Muslims. You cannot do that. As for the Supreme Court case where you're referring to Richard Clendist v. Mendel from 1972, that specifically was, again, it wasn't even Clendist himself that actually sued. It was the people who invited him that sued on his behalf. And the Supreme Court, the reason why they did not bother to act, it wasn't even that they ruled in favor of it. They specifically stated that they were not even going to bother to weigh against the First Amendment and discuss any of it due to the fact that he was a non-citizen and thusly did not have any constitutional protections. They stated that this specific decision not to let him into the country, because the people that sued on his behalf specifically sued because they stated that it violated their First Amendment rights. And the Supreme Court stated that him not being allowed in the country because he was a security concern had nothing to do with their rights, their First Amendment rights as citizens. Two completely different, those situations are completely different from what is being suggested here in this idea that we should be able to ban the religion of Islam and its practitioners from holding office, and the idea that we should be able to just ban Islam from anybody who practices Islam from traveling into the country. It's a completely different situation here.
Again, I'm going to reiterate that I maintain that my stance is simply a test on a person's character rather than their religion. So this is again this is why I brought up those previous cases, is that these people's characters were put under test rather than their First Amendment rights, even if they were not citizens. Because we do have Supreme Court precedent that gives non-citizens Supreme Court protection, especially in terms of illegal aliens. That being said, we have an issue here where the United States has maintained its sovereignty to defend itself from threats that they deem that they deem existential threats outside the United States. Hence the blanket ban. Again, like you said, it really towed a line, yes, but it was still a ban nonetheless that the U.S. government saw fit to defend itself by limiting the movement of these people. Now, yes, again, you're going to come back to citizens. I agree that these people have their First Amendment rights. However, I will reiterate that if a person, this is not a test of their religion, it's a test of their character. It's what you do with your religion is what the issue is here, which has been upheld several times, that you cannot claim religious exemption from a problem or a crime that you have committed. Hence the reason why animal sacrifice, by and large, is banned in the United States for that simple fact. Now, that being said, my issue here is when you have historical evidence of Islamists and Muslims, whether they be natural-born citizens or whether or not they be immigrants, coming in and trying to change the core tenets of a country to match the core tenets of their religion, which would then fly in the face of the Constitution, as they have said, have many Muslim scholars have stated that they wish to make this a Muslim country by working within. Another moderate Muslim scholar, his name escapes me right now, I apologize, but he said that if, as a radical Muslim, he only voted a certain way to push Muslim ideals and Muslim values, overriding the home country tenets and values. That is the main issue here: is a man or woman's test of character using their religion to push their political goal.
Okay, so the question that I have to start off with, right? Because you're saying that now what it sounds like to me anyways is it sounds to me like your argument is not what the actual basis of this debate was agreed to be upon. Like this is kind of where I'm at now, where I am thoroughly confused, because if we go back and we look at let me see if I can find it. If we go back and we look at what the actual debate topic and agree on was
limiting the rights and travel rights of Muslims into the United States.
Let me see. Should Muslims be barred from political office? Should there be an actual Muslim travel ban? Would these proposals be constitutional?
Correct. That
right?
was
So the question that I have then is, if you're saying that for you it's not about the religion, it's about the individuals, then what is the relevance or the significance of the religion? If it's just about the individuals and you're just advocating to tighten regulation to make sure that corrupt individuals do not get into the government, what's the significance of the religion? Why are we focusing so heavily specifically on the religion?
Because let me pull it up. Because we have several instances of prominent Muslim speakers and scholars pushing several anti-Western philosophy that are core tenets within the Quran. Which, for example, you have Surah Allah. I apologize. I do not know how to pronounce this properly, but Al-Maidah, which is verse 5, verses 44 through 47. Whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, those are disbelievers. Continued. Radicals, which make up the silent majority. Make up the vocal minority of the Muslim practitioners of the world, use the Qutb and Madabi use for this, which is
you're talking about taqiyya?
No, takafir, excommunication on rulers following secular Western laws, arguing no obedience is due to them. This extends to Muslims in the West disregarding laws seen as contradicting Sharia on interests of modesty and blasphemy. Now, that being said, the core crux of this issue is that we have an issue where the silent majority of Muslims, who most likely are moderate individuals who just want to practice the peaceful tenets of Islam and want to be good people, are silent in their disregard and outright refusal of the radicals that are arguably the minority of the modern Muslim world, especially in the Western Hemisphere. Now, that being said, that goes along with what we saw in the most recent October 7th attack, where you had American Muslims openly stating death to America, death to Israel, and none of the prominent moderate scholars said shut up. So we have an issue here, a major disconnect of, do these people actually believe in the moderate tenets that they claim to be, or do these people actually side with them and they're just being silent about it, thus practicing a form of taqiyya? Now, again, this is where I'm going to draw back to what I'm saying is the test. I've always maintained that a test on a person's character is paramount, but you cannot test somebody's character without checking their core tenets and core beliefs first.
Okay. So first, real quick, Ozik Loafer, thanks for stopping in. I appreciate the follow. Welcome to the chat. So to start off with, right? Again, it sounds to me like we should just be focusing on the individual, what you're claiming, and I'm failing to see any level of justification for a focus on the religion, let alone a foundation of constitutionality that would justify specifically a restriction on the religion or a targeted restriction on individuals, whether it be extra scrutiny based upon their religion, that would prove it to be constitutional, right? Because we can agree that we should absolutely tighten restrictions. I think you and I can both agree that there are way too many corrupt people, period, in the government, and that the government as it currently stands, whether you be on the left or the right, cannot be trusted. But that just means that we should tighten restrictions and regulations to increase scrutiny on every single person that attempts to enter office. Not specific scrutiny based upon their religion, which is why I asked about the significance of the religion. And I'm still looking for, that constitutional basis here that would justify extra scrutiny based upon somebody's religion just because we have a vocal minority stating things and breaking the law, which in and of themselves, yes, it has already been established that your religion in and of itself is not a justification for violation of U.S. law. And thusly, those people should absolutely be persecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But targeting somebody based upon their religion for additional scrutiny is unequivocally not constitutional. So I'm still failing to see this connect.
My argument lands squarely on Congress's plenary powers. I understand that we've discussed several cases that hearken to other that have been shot down simply because they were sought to be solely only focusing on someone's religion. However, when you are faced with a potential crisis, Congress and the executive have a unique power granted to them by the Constitution to do what they must in order to protect the Republic. I, again, will reiterate that there are several core tenets within the Quran that are being preached by and I will concede could be being used as could be twisted, for lack of a better term, to rile up these radicals. As you have stated, they are radicals and they are not subject to the protections of the First Amendment. That being said, until we have a situation where Congress can easily define when something is when something is being scrutinized, and okay, I'm using word salad. I apologize.
No, you're good. I understand that you're trying to gather your thoughts, and that's perfectly fine. Like if you need to take a second, take a second.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, no. My core issue here is that Congress and the executive have unique powers granted to them by the Constitution to do what they must to defend the republic. And the major issue here is that we have core tenets being used, whether literally or being twisted, to push anti-Western values. And at the core of it, Islam, unfortunately, is antithetical to Western values. And so, thus, that would give Congress the power, the constitutional power, to excise extra scrutiny, whether that be barring them from travel, putting massive limitations on their immigration, whether that would be potentially putting far more scrutiny into allowing them into office. That is something that lies squarely within the constitutional rights of the Congress and the president.
So I understand that you're harkening back to the 50s and 60s cases, right? But we actually have a much more recent ruling, specifically in the Trump v. Hawaii Supreme Court case, where they actually explicitly covered what you're talking about in their ruling. So specifically with the Trump v. Hawaii case that I mentioned, earlier on at the beginning of the debate, right? They specifically addressed Proclamation 9645, which was essentially like I think it was like his third or fourth iteration of the travel ban. It specifically it indefinitely restricted entry for nationals from 7 different countries: Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and then Venezuela. That was the other one. It was a 5-4 decision, so it was a pretty damn close decision, right? Now,
Correct.
the 5-4 decision, they specifically upheld the ban as constitutional. And it was Chief Justice Roberts that wrote for the majority. He specifically stated that the proclamation was within the president's statutory authority under the INA, that it did not violate the Establishment Clause because it was facially neutral, right? So it did not explicitly target Muslims, and it had sufficient national security justification despite evidence of anti-Muslim statements that Trump had made during his campaign, right? So they specifically stated, like, the only reason why this is constitutional, despite, Trump's open statements and against Islam as a religion and against those who practice it, right? The only reason why it is constitutional is because it is walking that thin line of facial neutrality by including other countries that are also significant security concerns. The other thing too is that specifically in 9645, when they were talking about the justification behind each individual country, they mentioned absolutely nothing about the religion. It had everything to do with military concerns. It had everything to do with political instability and economic instability. It had everything to do with increased crime rates within those countries and the concern from other countries that had allowed people that immigrated from those countries on the list to enter their country, and how those people consistently were increasing the crime rate, right? Courts, they also specifically stated that courts should apply a rational basis, which is, a very low bar to such executive actions on immigration, deferring to the president's judgment unless there's a clear evidence of bad faith, such as, for example, explicitly targeting Muslims. And then when we look at the dissenting views, right? Because I think it was Sotomayor, Ginsburg, and then Breyer and Kagan. I think they were the ones that were arguing that it was unconstitutional. They explicitly were citing, Trump's public statements as evidence of religious animus. And they specifically brought up the Supreme Court case of Karamatsu v. the United States, which was the Japanese internment case, which the majority opinion repudiated, but was then distinguished, right? They personally viewed it as a thinly veiled Muslim ban that failed even a rational basis scrutiny, which in and of itself kind of irrelevant in terms of, them saying like, oh, it's a thinly veiled attack on Muslims, when really it's not. But it does show that ultimately, at the end of the day, an express target on Islam, regardless of the quote unquote national security concern, would be unconstitutional because it would be the targeting of a religion. there's a significant difference between a cultural religion and something like Marxism or communism, right? Especially because during the time that these cases were happening in the 50s and 60s, we were dealing with active Marxist spies and communist spies that were trying to steal intelligence. We were also dealing with people who were actively attempting to commit violence and, overthrow government areas. This was a very common thing that happened, especially around the time of in the 50s and 60s. It was very, very heavy on things like union busting. It was not uncommon for you to see Marxists and communists specifically that were essentially creating their own mini unions, but these unions were little more than just violent gangs that would go around beating the crap out of business owners and homeowners. That was the Yeah, go ahead.
So the crux of my argument is baked into what you were saying, that my argument is stating that we need facial neutrality in this scenario. However, which also there is a wide, a very sorry, not a wide, a very narrow line here that would make it constitutional. As stated, that there is clear evidence, as you also admitted to, clear evidence of people emigrating from these Muslim majority states, which constituted a increase of violence or crime in these host states. And we see that here in the United States happening as well, with the increased murders and sexual assaults of young women across the country. That being stated, this is also extended to the fact that you also made mention of how the Marxists and communists were actively trying to damage the U.S. government through spying and basically creating little mobs with unions or unions in name only. That is also happening here in the United States, where there is several recorded instances of the FBI breaking up radical Islamist cells, raiding mosques that had the cell operating out of it, radicalizing people, imams that were radicalizing people against the Western values and doctrine here. So we have facial neutrality and also evidence to support that, given the opportunity, the immigrants or radicalized individuals will exercise danger against the host nation based solely off of the tenets that they deem are acceptable in their religion. Now, again, the wording in what I'm saying here is that it has to be facially neutral, just like how we stated in Trump v. Hawaii. It has to be. I've made that very clear, that it needs to be facially neutral. And if this law were to pass tomorrow, it would face severe scrutiny, yes. But I feel and I think there is sufficient anecdotal, maybe, evidence of them posing a existential threat, just like how the Marxists and communists did in the 1950s.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to say. Okay. Number one, you cannot be facially neutral and still hold the stance about explicit Muslim, like Islam as a religion being the basis for the determination, which is the argument you've been presenting this entire time. The fact of the matter is that what you are arguing, as you've just admitted about it potentially being anecdotal evidence, meaning that's your opinion, you are arguing your opinion on national security against constitutionality. That is what this argument is that this entire time you've been arguing your opinion about national security versus constitutionality. You have not presented a single actual constitutional basis that would justify the explicit targeting of a religion at all. This is purely your opinion on national security in regards to Muslims and their immigration or their existence here within the country, be it they be born here or not. There is no basis for constitutionality on that. Trump v. Hawaii has proven that. Tarasco v. Oh my God, why can't I remember the name of it again? But the Tarasco case as well, again, states this. Article 6, Clause 3 of the Constitution states this. And the First and 14th Amendments all state this. The only reason why those Muslim majority countries were allowed to be a part of the indefinite travel ban and it was deemed to be facially neutral is because it had nothing to do with the religion in the justification and everything to do with actual physical national security concerns in regards to the actions of individuals. The moment you start talking about a religion or a lack thereof or a participation in a religion, you violate the Constitution. The moment you place a metric for concern or a metric for determination or justification as a religion, you violate the Constitution. We can agree that there should absolutely be more laws and restrictions put in place in order to better vet individuals. And we can agree that there are countries that happen to be Muslim majority that are of national concern that absolutely should be a part of an indefinite travel ban. But it is not because of the religion, and any attempts to make an argument in regards to the religion fails to pass a constitutionality test.
I'm again gonna clarify that my basis isn't based. I would argue that it's not based off of my opinion. I stated that it may be anecdotal, but there are real world evidence and real world instances where the U.S. government had to get involved in a Muslim terrorist cell, many of which were homegrown terrorists that were radicalized by foreign-born Muslims. That is the crux of the issue here. Now, I'm also stating that it can be facially neutral because I've consistently upheld the stance that it needs to be, as you stated, it needs to have a higher scrutiny on an individual before they can or cannot hold office. Now, that being stated, I'm fine with that scrutiny being against those of the Jewish faith, those of the Christian faith. I'm fully okay with that. But to disregard the absolute empirical truth that these Muslim majority countries have borne a lot of the major issues and crime rates going on in Europe, and now the fledgling increased crime rate in America is not. It's not causation. What's the term? It's not. It's not a lack of evidence there. It's a lack of people not willing to call a spade at this point. Now, again, I will reiterate my statement and stance is as follows. If America has the power to defend ourselves and maintain that we have national sovereignty and maintains that even the tenets of a religion cannot supersede U.S. law, it thus must maintain a neutral stance that if a religion or an individual from a religion is touting anti-American, anti-Western sentiments and against the laws and against the welfare of its people, that constitutes a constitutional crisis and uh, requires Congress and the executive to take action while also maintaining that the moderate population are not affected.
Okay, so number one, this is not a neutral stance, like at all. Okay, correlation does not equal causation.
Yes, that was the term I was looking for. I apologize.
Yeah. Number two, if we're gonna again, there is no constitutionality for the focus on Islam. Okay, just because there have been some terrorist cells that have been busted up here in the United States, which we all know that there have been, right? We can all agree that that is wrong. That shouldn't be a thing that is allowed, and it certainly isn't. And those people are always persecuted to the fullest extent of the law. There's still no constitutional justification for a specific target on the religion of Islam in and of itself, regardless of quote unquote empirical data, especially because, again, this is just simply an argument for a concern over tightening restrictions on vetting an individual, and thusly the religion of Islam in and of itself has no place in that topic of discussion. You are, again, using your opinion of national security and on the religion of Islam to justify and drive your concerns and your justification for this idea of a policy. Because the fact of the matter is it's not the religion, it's the individuals and the culture that is centered around the religion. A good example would be Judaism. Judaism has plenty of tenets that require things like stoning, beheading, all kinds of things like that, right? Judaism actively has that. But you don't see Jews in the United States stoning people for violating Judaic law. You don't see Jews in the United States beheading people or hanging people or anything along those lines, right? We don't see that. Why? Because it's the individuals and the culture, not necessarily the religion. And anybody who violates those laws should absolutely be persecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So again, you cannot be facially neutral and target a religion. Your concern is with individuals that are coming from an area in which the culture that is around the religion is one that is violent, which is a valid concern and the whole reason why Trump v. Hawaii was upheld. The concern is not the religion, it's the people that are around those areas. Especially because also when you look at certain statistics in those countries, you'll find that a lot of the people that wind up immigrating over to places like Europe, for example, and they commit all the rapes and all of the murders and all of the robbings and all of that stuff, most of them are fleeing legal persecution from those same countries. Because in those countries, things like rape are not legal. But the problem is that the people from that area, just in general, that culture that's around there, they do kind of like what we see a lot of Christians do, just to a more extreme extent. They pick and choose what parts of the religion they want to follow based upon what benefits them at the time.
My my rebuttal to that would be that it would, while yes, a culture can influence a religion, we have seen real world evidence that a religion can certainly influence a culture as well. We see that with American culture. The core tenets of American individualism and our freedom and our Constitution are basis in evangelical Protestantism. Oh my fucking god, Protestantism is fucking Protestants. Anyway, I apologize.
Protestantism?
Protestantism. Thank you. Um, our values are derived from Christianity, whether people want to say they are not. that is a debate for another time. However, we would be remiss to say that the founders were not influenced by their religion or their proximity to the religion, because several of the founders were deists, some of them were atheists, but they still upheld core tenets and core values of the Christian faith that they were majority of. That being said, while yes, you can have a culture, a violent culture, which that's how Christianity dominated Europe, is that it was adopted by the Roman culture and morphed and became what Catholicism had become. That being stated, we would also be remiss to say that Islam and its core tenets have not affected or altered a host nation or a nation that it was forcibly converted to.
Okay. So, in response to that, I'm simply going to refer you back to Article 6, Section 3 of the Constitution. I'm going to refer you back to the 14th Amendment. I'm going to refer you back to the First Amendment, where it states that Congress shall establish they shall not establish a religion. I will also refer you to Thomas Jefferson. And by the way, props to Young Patriot on this one. I actually just happen to remember this quote that he had brought up when he was debating somebody else on a similar topic. But Thomas Jefferson specifically stated neither pagan nor Mohammedan, which was the word of the time for Muslims, nor Jew ought to be excluded from the civil rights of the Commonwealth. The fact of the matter is that while, yes, this country was founded on Christian values, because a good portion of the founding fathers were Christians, that's not a justification.
I honestly don't know where I'm going to go through from here. Okay.
By the way, Colin, thanks for the shout out, Colin.
Hey man, I hate literally the only reason why I even knew about that quote was because you had used it in the past before in another debate on a similar topic.
Yeah. Patriot's really good when it comes to quotes, so he's awesome when it comes to that.
Like I give props where props are due. So I guess seeing as how you got to open first, I guess I'll be the first one to take a question.
Yeah, that's real quick before we get to the questions, I just want to point out another really important quote. It's from John Adams directly in the 1997 Treaty of Tripoli. He stated that we are not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
I can refute that, but I'm going to wait for questions.
Sure. The solution to places like Dearborn, Michigan, is simply to refer them back to the Constitution. If they attempt to establish things like Sharia law, that's a violation of the Constitution, because several laws under Sharia law directly go against the Constitution. Those people should absolutely be persecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because Sharia law in and of itself does in fact violate the Constitution. It literally is the simplest resolution. If they break the law, and they get persecuted.
I'm sorry, was the question that religion is inherently a Western value? I freedom of religion. Um, because I'm basing my argument off of the fact that we have ruling court precedent and congressional law that purposely curtails tenets of religion that would break the U.S. law and neutrality when it comes to religion.
Because that was the claim that was made to me.
I'm focusing on religion because I have seen and noticed that individuals in high office in the United States use their religion as a cornerstone of their public office and what they deem is necessary for American values and American citizens.
It's who made you think the most, not necessarily who you agree with the most. Though, of course, who made you think the most can be who you agree with the most. You know what I'm saying? I don't have any questions solely because I kind of felt that you guys answered everything that was on my mind during the debate. Though the last half of the last I'd say 10 minutes of the debate though was just complete regurgitation of the first 40 minutes. But nonetheless, though, solid debate overall. It lasted about an hour. Yeah, solid debate.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this debate, Air. I hope you think that I'm not a lesser person. But I really did enjoy this debate, and thank
Yeah,
you for
no, so I definitely want to clarify